So we're going to round off this chapter kind of further looking at overall the ideas of how organizational culture translates to an organization that is toxic and less likely to be creative and innovative versus healthy and is more likely to be creative and innovative. And that's why these things are combined in this particular module, is that when we're talking about how to try to create an environment that enhances or increases the likelihood of innovation and creativity, one of the tools we have is trying to make sure people are empowered and are in a healthy organizational climate or culture. So we're going to talk about creativity and innovation in this last module for this week. And again, what is creativity? Although you probably have no difficulty recognizing creativity when you see it, defining creative can be actually just very challenging. Like, how do we systematically measure creativity, define something as creative, and then also start discussing how can we set up a situation in an organization that makes creativity supported and more likely? So one of the things we want to talk about is that depending on the organization is going to depend on the amount of creativity that is necessary. Different people like different things, and different people find things creative. For example, I am very fond of Blue Man Group. I like going to their shows. I've gone to their concerts. I enjoy their music. I enjoy their antics. My wife is somewhat confused by this. She doesn't really find it that creative. She just finds it weird. So again, there's going to be differences in what some people perceive as creative or not. The question is it creative to the target audiences that an organization is trying to sell to? So again, that's going to vary differently, for example, from a car manufacturer to an ad agency to an entertainment company. Each of them is going to be viewing creativity as something a little bit different. So our definition for creativity is the process by which individuals or teams produce novel and useful ideas. That and is very important here, especially from an organizational viewpoint. We're wanting to basically create an environment which allows individuals or teams to come up with creative solutions, to come up with creative ideas, to come up with creative products. And creative usually means somewhat novel, something new. But it also needs to be useful and sellable. In other words, there has to be a market for the creative idea. So when we're looking at it from those viewpoints, when we start to define it in an organizational standpoint, we start to be able to talk about the components of creativity. The first is domain relevant skills, basic knowledge. This doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a master of whatever you're looking at, so years of education, years of experience, but you at least need to know the basics of what can and cannot be done in the area that you're looking at. So the first thing we want to see within an individual or a team, and this is more about creating a team or choosing an individual that's more likely to be creative, is we want to start with, do they have the basic knowledge? Do they have the creative relevant skills, special abilities, novel ways to look in the world? In other words, are they inclined towards creative activity? Are they open to new experiences? Are they used to kind of thinking about things in creative and new ways? Do they generate ideas by looking outside of the field? So, for example, a lot of times where people will look for creativity is not necessarily in the field that they're doing. So, for example, if we were looking at car manufacturing, and my goal was to create an innovative or creative new product of car, I might also be looking at areas of architecture. I might be looking at current trends in housing. I might be looking at current trends in fashion or even furniture. All of those might give me thoughts or ideas of how to create or integrate those ideas into a car design. And finally, is there an intrinsic motivation, an internal motivation to be willing to be creative? And you need all three of these to truly be creative. You need to have some basic knowledge, and this is really about making sure that the ideas are useful. You need those creative relevant skills, the ability to produce novel ideas, and finally, you need to be generally internally motivated to be willing to be creative. Now, within an organization, we kind of can think about the first two, we can probably measure and design. We can create a team that has the basic knowledge. We can create a team that has those abilities to think in novel ways, or we can choose an individual that has these two. The third one is what we really want to focus on. Are we also providing the support for the person to fail or the group or team to fail? And are we giving them that empowerment to allow them to want to be creative? If every time a creative solution is presented by a team or an individual, it is always shot down or it is never acted upon, that is creating a lack of motivation, if you will. That's communicating that creativity is not appreciated. So I'm not saying that an organization has to accept every idea, but if there is a new idea, it's novel and it's useful, the organization should put some support into at least further exploring, is it something that the company wants to do? So some creative relevant skills, the ability to break mental sets and take new perspectives. So basically what we refer to as divergent thinking. The process of reframing familiar problems in unique ways. Take a fresh look at old problems. So we do have a tendency to stick with what's worked in the past. And any innovation is about proceeding through and thinking, well, is the solution that currently is accepted the right way? And it is a good question because sometimes the answer very well may be we've already come up with the best answer, the cheapest answer, and the cleanest answer that is a solution to this problem. And that if we're coming up with a unique way to do it, we might be able to market it to certain people because it's unique, but is it necessarily going to actually be novel and better? That doesn't mean it's not something that can be profited off of. And in fact, if you've watched any made for TV advertisements, in other words, things, as seen on TV, a lot of times, if you really think about it, are they really providing a better way to do something, or are they just providing a different way to do something? But no matter what, that's still an example of divergent thinking, thinking of new ways, thinking of new concepts, including things that we've already kind of accepted this is the way things are done. We need to understand the complexities. We don't want to simplify everything. So we want to understand that when we're trying to be creative, when we're trying to come up with creative solutions, those creative solutions do cause ripples. They will affect other departments, they will affect other people, they will affect our clients, our customers. Basically, again, we want to think about it from an open systems viewpoint. Do we have the resources to make this project? Do we have the internal processes to create this product? Is there a customer base outside of the organization that's interested in this product? And are they willing to pay what we would have to charge for this product? And do we get feedback once the project launches? Now, again, when we're talking about creativity broadly outside of organizations, we're not necessarily looking at this, we're looking at probably a different process. But the process is still there. The process of can we do it, how do we do it, and is someone interested in us doing it? We want to keep our options open and avoid premature judgments. We want to continue to consider all angles. In other words, one of the killers of creativity is the second a new idea happens, everyone just goes all in on it. We want to keep those doors open as much as possible, and we want to basically follow what's called the creativity heuristic. Creativity heuristics is rules that allow people to follow to approach tasks in a novel way. So productive forgetting, for example, the ability to abandon unproductive ideas and temporarily put aside stubborn problems until new approaches can be considered. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on for a lot of the remaining slides is various ways to foster creativity and innovation, to create a situation or structure that allows more creativity and more innovation, but at the same time is not necessarily reliant on having an enormously innovative or creative person in the first place. If you do have someone that's naturally creative and innovative, they will be even further able to kind of glow or grow, if you will, in this environment. But it will also encourage people that might not normally be creative to be more creative. So again, kind of focusing on, and this is a very simple, just a little joke, unique. Just because you're unique does not mean you're useful. When we're talking about creativity and innovation organizations, we need that big and in there. It needs to be a novel approach and it needs to be useful. And by useful, we mean there must be utility, that there is an audience that is willing to pay for this new idea. So again, we're going to look at a few project models that help us kind of conceptualize this creative process. In other words, how do we learn to be more creative, but also how do organizations kind of create an environment that encourages creativity? And this is a quick 4-step model. And the first step is to be prepared to be creative. Gather information, gather your team together, decide what you're trying to accomplish, and also concentrate on what's been done, but also what could be done better. Step 2 is allow the ideas to incubate. So after that initial information gathering and concentrating on potential solutions, don't immediately jump on a solution. Let people sleep on it. And it's not just sleeping on it, it's letting people process the information. Have a few meetings. Come back to the ideas and re-examine them. Step 3, document your insights. So capturing your new ideas. So the ideas that make it through steps 1 and 2 need to start to be actually thought of a little bit more concretely of what are the ideas, what would it take, how much would it cost, and how could it be produced. And that moves us to step 4, assessing the usefulness of the ideas. Do they pass that muster test of how hard would it be to do? Is it within the wheelhouse and skills and abilities of the organization to do this? If we did, how much would it cost? And finally, based on the cost, would there be an audience? So there's a Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson is asked to design a car, and he's given complete carte blanche. In other words, he can come up with anything he wants, and he comes up with everything that he's ever wanted in a car, and the company builds it. Unfortunately, it costs at the time, I think it was like $70,000. That'd probably be over $100,000 today because this was a fairly old Simpsons episode. And that's the idea. Was it an innovative vehicle? Absolutely. Was it including many features that someone might want? Yes, indeed. But would the people that want it be able to afford it? Most likely not. So when we're promoting creativity, we're training people to be creative. We're giving them that ability to empower and make decisions, but we're also giving them the room to create and use these models to become more creative. We're encouraging the openness to new ideas, and that might be a cultural component. We take the time to understand the problem. In other words, creativity does not happen quickly. Creativity needs to be given some time to percolate, if you will. Ideas need to be generated that may or may not work out and then given time to determine if they are functional or not. We need to develop that divergent thinking in our employees, allowing employees to basically come up with ideas that are not the norm. Morphology is an approach to analyzing problems in which the elements are combined in a systematic way: materials, shapes, colors, and functions. So again, we need to think about that as well. And that's another model we can use. We can use morphology to basically think about what are the elements that are currently a part of the normal result or the standard solution to this problem. What are the materials? What's the shape? What's the color? What's the function? What can we change in that that might actually make this a different project, a creative product, or something that actually people are wanting or interested in? And sometimes it's fairly simple. Sometimes it might simply be we take a tool that already exists, but we make it smaller or more curved to where it can fit into unique situations that the tool normally could not fit in. Now, it is not necessarily a tool everyone's going to want, but anyone that's working in tight spaces would probably want that tool. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about when we're talking about morphology. We want to make sure we develop creative environments. So we want to take steps to change the environment of people's jobs in ways that bring out creativity. We want to give them the space, we want to give them the resources, we want to give them the ability to do research, and we want to give them the time it takes to be creative. That's the steps that we have to take from an organizational viewpoint if we want to promote creativity. So how do we develop a creative work environment? There's quite a list in the chapter, and I definitely suggest that you, as always, read through the chapter as well. But some of the steps that usually result in a more creative workplace, and research has found these all to be supported, is first, provide autonomy. So I've often talked about empowering workers, allowing people to make their own decisions. That's the same with creative environments. If people are not allowed to make their own decisions or constantly having to check with upper management on every step they do, you're much less likely to see creativity. You want to provide exposure to other creative people. So basically, you want to provide not only that people that are creative are allowed to work with other creative people, but maybe even within the organization, provide some resources for creative people, people whose job is to come up with creative solutions, to actually have access to other creative people outside of the organization, going to conferences, going to creative activities to kind of further that knowledge. Allow ideas to cross-pollinate. So if an idea seems to be a good idea, allow it to actually be shared with other people and other teams so that they can look at the ideas as well. Make jobs intrinsically interesting. So we've already kind of talked about job design theory, creating jobs that are more interesting. And we often do find that the more interesting the job, the more varied the job, the more the person has in control of what they do and are doing many different things using many different skills, they're also more likely to be creative. Set own creative goals. So encourage people not only to be setting goals within the organization that are based on their tasks, but also to set creative goals. Come up with 2 new ways to do something over a period of time. And support creativity at the high organizational levels. And this is the same of any attempt to create a culture or to basically support behaviors within an organization. the more that change is being supported by all levels of the organization, from the top down through all levels of management, the more likely it will be to succeed. Promoting diversity, of course, also increases creativity within workplaces. Again, more people with different viewpoints all working on the same problem are more likely to come up with more creative or interesting solutions. And finally, creativity in itself should be somewhat fun. It should be a process that people enjoy doing. And if it isn't, that's probably going to reduce the amount of creativity involved. So again, think of this as another one of those laundry lists of if we're trying to create a team whose organizational goal is to come up with creative solutions, we want to think about this laundry list, if you will, and start deciding what can we do to ensure this team has the proper tools and environment to succeed. So when we move from creativity to innovation, really what we're talking about is innovation is the process of adopting of new products, services, and processes or procedures by an organization. So if creativity is having the idea, innovation is adapting, adopting, and utilizing or incorporating those creative ideas into the organization itself. It's the building block. So again, there has to be the motivation to innovate, supportive culture. There has to be the resources to innovate, the people available and the cash. And you need an innovative management that's open to providing encouragement, setting innovative goals, rewarding innovative behavior, and again, time pressure. There needs to be a balance here. Obviously, no organization can allow months or years for decisions to happen, but there also needs to be the understanding that being innovative may take longer than just doing the same things in the same way. We're also going to talk a little bit about organizational change in further chapters, and one of the things we're going to find is there often is resistance to innovation and creativity. And I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is we don't want to innovate simply for the purpose of innovating. If we're changing for change's sake and it's not resulting in improvement in the organization's products, processes, or feedback loops, then there's probably a problem with that innovative. Some companies get into this cycle of constantly changing, but the change is not being driven, if you will, by changes in the environment, changes in what they produce, or changes in the feedback they're getting. They're just innovating to innovate. We want to make sure that within organizations, any creativity and innovation is novel, new, and useful. It has utility. It makes for better performance. So the final slide I want to talk about is just kind of, again, a model of the process of innovation. And again, this is a 5-step model. The first stage is, again, setting the agenda. So motivating people and determining this is the changes we want to see. This is the innovation that we want to see. Stage 2 is setting the stage. And at that point, we're starting to see that individuals in team choice and productivity, we're wanting to see resources, and we're wanting to see the skills necessary. Stage 3 is much like in a lot of organizations and a lot of models, it's the actual producing the ideas. So, and producing the ideas here, this could be also a model for creativity, but we're mainly focused on innovation here. It's how do we adapt these creative ideas into the structure of the organization itself. Stage 4 is testing and implementing the ideas. So we actually have come up with how we're going to use them. We implement them and we start testing to make sure they work. And stage 5 is we assess the outcome. If we have pure success, we're done. We've innovated. It is stuck. If it's a failure, we stop as well and try something else, but we also back out of that innovation. If we've made progress, but we're not quite where we want to be yet, then we go back to stage 2 and continue the process. So again, this is an attempt to create a structure, if you will, around an unstructured process. The advantage of this, though, is that by using such a structured process, we start to get a better handle from a management perspective or a consultant perspective on how we need to go through the process of innovation, what it takes to be innovative, and how we can encourage innovation. As always, after you've read through or basically listened to these lectures and read through the chapter, if you have any additional questions, please post them on the discussion board in Canvas, and I'll talk to you next week.